Hello there. It's a beautiful day in England, and it's a big disappointment to me that I'm not in Rheinsberg joining you for the opening of my exhibition, which I would dearly love to be at, and I hope that you're enjoying it. I thought it might be a good idea, since I'm not there, if I talked a little bit about how this very particular group of ceramic works came about. And there are sort of two dimensions to that, one of which is a sort of history of accidents, like they always are, and the other which is a more kind of philosophical question about where we are in the world and how we live and what we perceive. So just to start with the first, in 2010, I was working in the workshop in Cologne, actually the ceramic workshop, but I was working in making some small additions or multiples in a cast resin from cardboard originals. And in fact, if you look at the film that we're showing, you'll see me hesitating and kind of trying to put together one of these cardboard models. But anyway, the first group of them were these. These are the first group. They're in that picture there on the table, but we decided to actually explore various ways of putting them on surfaces, like this on a piece of unfired ceramic. That comes to be important later, but in the end we ended up with them hanging on the wall like this, just pinned with a simple nail. And then I made another group which were slightly larger, more complex, and this is one of them. And these didn't fit the same, weren't so easy. They didn't fit. They didn't hang on the wall in quite the same way. They were a bit too complicated. We tried various places to put them. We ended up. I ended up putting them on the floor, and thinking that they look good on the floor, and that would be that kind of low level view would be the view that I thought they should have. However, they're too fragile to go on the floor. But I remembered our experiment with the earlier one. So we put one of the small ones on this ceramic, unfired ceramic block, and thought, well, that looks like a solution. That's how we'll show them. So we made up a number of ceramic blocks about the same size as same height as a pallet, 10 centimeters high by 80 by 80 square, because I didn't want to have an orientation, and originally produced 3 just as a experiment, and put them in the kiln to fire them. And when they came out, then there's 2 things that happen. One is that the as a solution to how to display these small objects, it looked kind of stupid, really. It didn't really work. It seemed like too much effort, and it wasn't obviously the answer. But the other thing was that actually firing a flat block of ceramic like that is quite difficult, and the surface kind of warped a bit in the kiln, and it was quite important that it was a flat surface. So then we said, okay, well, we'll just grind it flat, and then and go ahead like that. So we ground it flat, and grinding it flat made the texture of the material that's in the clay, the grog, the kind of pieces of fired clay that get mixed up with the raw clay to kind of give it a bit of body, then became sort of polished on the surface like terrazzo. That's the way you make terrazzo. You kind of lay down a surface and you polish it back in order to get thing. And as soon as I saw that, there was a sort of a kind of, it was like these light bulb moments. I thought, oh, that's what it's about. It's about the flat surface. And so the idea of this display stand kind of disappeared, but the fact of making these flat surfaces on the ground became a subject of really great interest to me. We made the first 8. We resolved the problems of how to fire a flat surface, and we made the first 8 and glazed them and fired them. Now, glazing is also kind of interesting when you're on a flat surface, because it's you don't get any, it doesn't run down. The glaze kind of just wanders around on the surface as when it goes liquid in the kiln, and therefore you have the opportunity to have a very much more fluid or liquid surface, and the progression of the way that I've worked on these has explored that kind of fusion that happens on melting, fusion that happens on the surface. So that those were the first 8, and I still didn't really have any idea what I was going to do with them. There was, but I was, like all good things, I was interested, without knowing, and I think this is kind of a measure of interest. You never know where you're going to end up, but and once you do know where you're going to end up, then it's over really. But while you're still kind of trying to find the route, then that's the interesting bit. So so those first 8 were square, and then the question of shape became interesting, and so the next and whether shape and height. So the next group was sort of slightly higher and more solid, but still with a flat top. And then that shape kind of gets dropped down and made into another group with different clays. It was also kind of exploring different clays and the relationship between the clay edge, whether it was a white clay or a red clay or a black clay, and this flat surface on the top, the conversation between the two. And then the next group, having made those, I got quite interested in the relationship between that top surface and the edge, and thought, would it be very nice if that edge could be very precisely cut, and there was a kind of really sharp distinction between the top and the side. So the next group exploits that possibility by using a pre-fired ceramic tile, big 70 by 70 tiles, and glazing the square tiles, and then cutting out with a water jet cutter the shapes, and also inserting another shape that's been cut inside that. So there were two things, so the surface isn't just one surface. It had another element cut and set into the surface. And then the most recent ones I've made they've kind of gravitated off the floor. Well, those and those cut ones kind of gravitated off the floor. They were a bit low to go on the floor, so they went up on tables. And then the next group I made was sort of bigger, but somehow they then started to gravitate up towards being a vertical thing rather than a flat thing. And so the last group are wall hung flat plates, and two of them two of those are in the exhibition on the freestanding on a piece of double-sided on a double-sided stand. Originally, we had an idea for where it might go in the palace itself, but when that possibility of showing work in the palace disappeared, I still wanted to retain that this element of the work in the show. So it's freestanding in the room. So that also is interesting because the edge, when you see those two hanging together, the glazed edge. I paid some attention to the edges, the edges of that last group of flat ones, and the white edge is a glazed edge. So the whereas the cut one is, it's the cut edge which is important. In this case, it's the white edge, and on a side view, when you've got the two edges plus the piece of wood that's in the stand together, that's becomes a significant element in the sculptural ensemble. So that's just a kind of short history of where how it started and where it and the kinds of things that triggered it. So there are. And mostly what I've talked about has been kind of to do with technical things, but you can also ask another question, which the title of this show. We're dealing with a show that's called On the Surface. Now, in English, on has multiple meanings. So if I'm talking about something, it can be on, so it's to do with the subject. On is also to do with placement. You put something, one thing on another thing. And it's also a place itself on the surface, that's but then the phrase on the surface refers both to that physical that point on the surface, but it's also a way of talking about things which can be different from what you imagine. So on the surface, I've got red hair, but in reality, I don't. And you can also think that on the surface itself is it's all there is. I mean, that's all we see is surfaces. I've even kind of sometimes suggested that depth itself was something illusory, and that perception is a kind of screen. It's just a surface. And I've often thought about this book, which is has a kind of title which I really like. I've had this book quite a long time. It's about things that I'm interested in the natural world, but also the idea of the surface film seems to be I mean, that's what we are. We're animals of the surface film. The Earth is the surface film. We're kind of animals on that. So, I mean, this is about insects that live on the surface of the water and are held up, exploit surface tension as a place a location to cling on to. So, talking about surface and things being on the surface has both, to me, has quite big existential implications, but it also deals with truth and falsehoods. You know, what's on the surface and what isn't. So, and the ways in which we negotiate the world. You know, what is it we see? We see only surfaces, and so that I think when I ground that piece of clay to flatten the top, and I said, oh, that's what it's about. It's about the surface. That was those thoughts kind of clicking in that I would that what I was interested in exploring is, admittedly within a bounded area, but the possibilities that surface revealed. And this exhibition, which, like I say, I would really like to join you with, is is the result of that exploration. Now, I hope you enjoy it, and like I say, I'm sorry I'm not there. I do have some thank yous to say to the various people who've made this exhibition possible. We've been discussing it for quite a while. And certainly there's all the people at the Académie de Kunst, Caroline Check, Catherine Aimé, Louise Weissenmuller, who's now moved on, and in the museum, Peter Burtek is someone I need to thank. Julian Heinen, who's who's taken heroically on the idea that he might walk through and show you the exhibition. He's someone that I need to thank. Justinia Niavara in my studio, who's been invaluable in providing all the documentation and the photographs. And then Shenko did the transport, Unit 1, who did the packing up. Mind Jazz, who've been Alessandro Lombardo at Mind Jazz, who have given us the permission to use the film and show the film during the course of the exhibition. And the workshop, Niels Dietrich and Roland Gatchman, who are the people who helped me make these things, get enormous thanks. And Mike Waite, who made the furniture, who made the tables and the stand. And then, of course, the person that I really have to thank is Angela Lammert. I mean, without her and her determination to see this exhibition through, it wouldn't happen. So, Angela, a huge thank you, huge heartfelt thank you from me. And to all of you, thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoyed the exhibition. Goodbye.